Good morning, Rio Grande third graders. I just want to take some time to add to our composition notebook. We remember that this is a resource that we can always come back and use to help us with any kind of questions that we may have about something that we are learning. For example, we have our multiples of 10 chart in here that we can always go back to take a look at. We have properties of multiplication. We have the order property. We're actually going to come back and take a look at that again at some point. We have the break apart strategy. We know we have our multiples of factors. So here's the factor, and then our multiples tell us when we're multiplying, and we skip count by these multiples, and these are going to be our products when we count by these factors. So lots of different reasons to make sure you keep up with your composition notebook and keeping up with your notes, because this is always going to be helpful for you in case you need or have questions. So let's take a look at our table of contents. And in our table of contents, the last set of notes that we took had to do with numbers as fractions, and we did fractions as parts of a whole. And so with page 11, and remember, the front is always the page that we're looking at. So on page 11, we're going to put notes in here for fractions as on a number line. So that's going to be NF2. So we're going to say fractions on a number line. And then once we have that on our table of contents, we know exactly where to go, because that's what a table of contents does. It helps us figure out what we're looking for and where to find it, right? We're going to go through and find page 10. Okay, so we had division on page 9 of equal groups. And then on page 10, we put this anchor chart in here, and we said fractions of a whole, or fractions of a figure, right? Fractions of a whole, or fractions of a whole figure in this case, is what we were talking about. And so if we're on page 10, we're going to skip to page 11. Okay, so this is going to be page 11. And we're going to fractions, put the title on the title line, fractions on a number line. Fractions on a number line. So we're going to write the standard that we want to be able to, what do we want to be able to do once we are finished with this particular concept or understanding? I understand how fractions can be modeled on a number line. And you should also be able to partition or divide up that whole on the number line into fraction or equal parts, right? Because that's what we've been doing. We've been talking about equal parts of a whole. So can be modeled on a number line, and I can partition the parts of the whole So you should be able to partition the parts of a whole based on a number line. Not necessarily a figure, but remember that one whole on the number line is actually thinking about, okay, I have a figure and it's one whole figure, and this number line is going to be one whole on the number line. So let's take the, I'm going to draw myself a number line here. And let's say that I want to partition this whole into thirds. So that's what this focus is going to be, is thirds. So that tells me I need to use 3 equal parts. From here to here, I have to divide it into 3 equal parts. Well, with thirds, we don't go down the middle because those would be halves. So with thirds, we have to use our spatial sense, what we understand about making things as close to equal as we can. And each one of these is going to be 1/3 of the whole. Just like if you were to think of 1/3 here, 1/3 of a rectangle, well, this is going to be 1/3 on a number line. 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. But from here to here is 1/3 piece. From here to here would be 2/3. And from here to here, we would label this 3/3. And the reason it's 3/3 is because all the parts are represented from this 0 up to this one whole. So if, like, for example, this is 2/3, each one of my unit fractions are still represented here. But if all of these were shaded in yellow, then I would say, oh, well, I have 3/3. But in this case, only 2 of them are shaded in yellow. Well, that's the same thing here. If this was yellow and this was yellow from there to there, then I could say, oh, that's 2/3. So the first step that we want to do is draw a number line. So draw a number line is step 1 when we are going to show a fraction on a number line. Draw a number line using 0, right? Or whatever whole number you need to draw up to at that point. Maybe you need to go up to 2. Maybe you need to go up to 3. But at this point, we only need one whole here. So we're going to draw a number line. We're going to partition or divide, right? Partition or divide the whole into the sections or pieces, right? Shown by the denominator. So our denominator is thirds. So in this case, this is our denominator. We have thirds as our denominator. So thirds for the denominator. Then so whatever that denominator may be, once we know our denominator, then we can use what we know about the numerator to locate or find the fraction that we want to pinpoint, put a point at. So step 2 is look at your numerator and count the sections, right? And count the parts. Or in this case, count the thirds. parts. Count the pieces or the parts that represent. Look at the numerator and count the pieces that show the numerator. Okay, so let's say, for example, I have 2/3 on my number line. And if I'm locating 2/3 on my number line, I come up here and I count 1, 2, 2 of these thirds. And from here to here would be my point to locate on my number line. So I'm going to show that here. Now, when you're partitioning, just as a reminder, when you're going to partition the whole, think about, especially if you're going to partition into smaller pieces, if you were going to partition, let's say, for example, if you were going to partition your whole into 6 equal pieces, you don't want to just start drawing lines anywhere. You want to try to make them as equivalent or as equal as possible. So start with one of the main or the simpler fractions that we talked about. For example, half. You can take half and break it up into fourths, and then you can take each one of those fourths and cut them in half and make eighths. Or, for example, if I wanted to make sixths, since 6 is a multiple of 3, I know that I can take thirds, and I could cut each third in half and make sixths. Or if I wanted to make ninths, I could take each third and cut it into 2 more pieces, or I could cut it 2 more times and have 3 equal parts. So you have to think about this understanding of your multiplication facts is or multiples is very important, because you can start to use that understanding to help you with partitioning your fractions into smaller pieces. And we'll talk about that more when we start to look at equivalent fractions, or fractions that are equal to the same as each other. So those are your notes for today. Make sure you have those copied and make sure that you put your page number, and we will see you soon. Have a great day, guys.